All right, well, we are back at it, and we are now on note 6-6, which is the negative exponent rule. Again, sorry that this camera is a little bit fuzzier, but it's going to have to work, so just do the best you can. You should be able to see what I'm writing, but if you can't make out what's written or typed, just refer to your paper. Okay, when you are doing the negative exponent rule, okay, the negative exponent rule says x to the negative a. When you're doing this, you are just going to flip it and make it a reciprocal. So this x to the negative a moves to the bottom piece, and it becomes x to the a, and we just write 1 on the top because technically there's a coefficient of 1 here. So the coefficient stays on the top and the negative exponent goes to the bottom, and that's how we make it positive. So I think today I'm going to do odds, but before we do this, I'm going to give you some orders, the order here. The first thing you're going to do is the power rule. Remember, that's where you have some exponent on the outside. The second thing you're going to do is multiply or divide. The third thing you're going to do is you're going to add or subtract. And the last step for today is to take care of the negative. Now, what I mean by take care of the negative is you are going to only move negative exponents. Don't move coefficients, and I don't care what the sign is. If it's a negative coefficient, you don't move it. If it's a positive coefficient, you don't move it. Coefficients stay where they're at. So going over this, we're going to work on the odds. For number 1, when I have x to the negative fifth, since you do not have a coefficient, well, technically there's a 1, you're going to leave the 1 on the top, and that x is negative, so I put it on the bottom and make it positive. That's how I get rid of it. That's the answer. That's it. You're done. For number 3, okay, this is the only negative exponent piece. So I'm going to open up a fraction. Only that negative letter gets moved to the bottom. So the negative 7 coefficient stays on the top. The a to the negative 4 gets moved to the bottom, and it becomes a positive 4. And the b to the third stays on the top because it's already positive, and we don't change things that are positive. Okay, so now moving to number 5. You have to figure out what rule you have to do first, and then apply the rule, and then take care of the negatives. That's the last thing you do. So this is a multiplication problem. So we're going to do 4 times 5, which is 20. And when you're multiplying, you add your exponents. So 8 plus negative 5 gives me c to the third. And negative 3 plus negative 1 gives me d to the negative fourth. Now that is my answer is not a negative exponent. So to get rid of that negative exponent, everything that does not have a negative exponent stays on the top. So 20c to the third will stay on the top. And d, and it becomes a positive 4, moves to the bottom. So you just move the negative thing. Okay, for number 7, again, it's a multiplication problem, but I don't have coefficients this time, so I don't need to multiply any numbers. I'm just going to go straight to adding my coefficients. So for a, I have negative 5 and 7, which will give me a squared. For b, I have 5 and negative 3, which gives me b to the fifth. And for c, I have negative 12 and 7, which when I add gives me c to the negative fifth. I'm not okay with that as my final answer because right here I have a negative exponent. So I open up a fraction, and if it's positive, I leave it alone. I don't mess with it. And if it's negative, I move it to the bottom to make it positive. So a squared b to the fifth over c to the fifth. For number 9, we're now doing the exponent rule with the power rule. Okay, so power rule. You need to be very careful on this one. You have a 5. I can't decide where the calculator's better. Okay, so I have a 5, and it's to the negative third power. Well, I don't like decimals, so we're going to convert this back to a fraction, and that gives me 1/25. So this is 1/125. I'm saying that wrong. 1/125. And then I multiply. 2 times negative 3 would become negative 6. I'm not okay with this as my answer because of that negative exponent. So in this problem, since you already have a fraction, you just keep it and you kind of extend the fraction bar line. And since that y is negative, it gets moved down to the bottom with a denominator. We don't create a second fraction. Okay, for number 11, let me move this really quick. I have 6x to the 5th, y to the negative 4th, and it's to the negative 2nd. So this is the power rule. So I'm going to take 6, and we're going to go to the negative 2nd. I do not want decimals, so I'm going to convert this back into a fraction, and that fraction is 1/36. Now I multiply my exponents, so 5 times negative 2 would give me x to the negative 10, and negative 4 times negative 2 would give me y to the 8. This piece is the only piece I'm not okay with, so I keep my fraction of 1/36 and extend my fraction bar line. That x has to drop to the bottom, and the y stays on the top because it's already positive, and there's my final answer. Okay, for number 3, I have c to the negative 2, d to the negative 1, divided by c to the 7th, d to the negative 2. So for this one, this is ready to go. It's division. I don't have coefficients, so I'm just going to go into subtracting. So when you do negative 2 and you subtract 7, that becomes c to the negative 9. And when you do negative 1 and you subtract negative 2, so like this one, actually becomes a positive 1. So this is d to the 1st. Now, I'm not okay with that piece because I can't have negatives, so I'm going to open up my fraction. That negative piece goes to the bottom and becomes positive, and the d to the 1st stays on the top because it's positive and we don't move positive. For number 15, it's a division problem again, so we divide coefficients, so negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5, and we subtract exponents. 2 minus 3 gives me into the negative 1, and 1 minus negative 5 gives me into the 6th. The only piece that I'm not okay with is this one right here. So I'm going to open up my fraction, and everything besides that negative exponent stays on the top, and the negative moves to the bottom. Okay, flipping over to the back for a few more examples. For number 17, I have 15 divided by 18. So here we go, 15 divided by 18. Convert that back into a fraction. So that would be 5/6. And then 2 minus 2 cancels, so a is gone. 5 minus 3 becomes squared. And 8 minus 9 becomes negative 1. So therefore, when I go to get my final answer for this, I keep the 5/6, but extend that fraction bar. The b is positive, so I leave it on top, and the c must move to the bottom because it's negative. So this would be 5b squared over 6c. For number 19, we have, I'm going to actually just put it right into fraction form, negative 9 over 54. So negative 9 over 54. I hit enter and I get negative 1/6. Now 2 minus 5 becomes negative 3. 6 minus 2 becomes 4. And 4 minus 8 becomes negative 4. I'm not okay with this piece or this piece because they're negative. So I'm going to keep that negative 1/6, extend the bar. The r has to drop to the bottom and become positive. The s is going to stay on the top, and the t has to drop to the bottom and become positive. So therefore, I have my answer. For 21, excuse me, I do have the power rule happening. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I don't have coefficients on these, so I'm just going to multiply. So this becomes x to the negative 4th, y to the negative 6th, bring down the times, x to the negative 15th, y to the negative 12th. Now, since I am multiplying, I still don't have coefficients, so I just add my exponents. So this becomes x to the negative 19, and it becomes y to the negative 18. Well, I'm not okay with either of those pieces, so I open up a fraction. The 1 stays on the top, because remember, there is a coefficient of 1. The x drops to the bottom, and the y drops to the bottom, and there's my final answer. Okay, just 2 more. For 23, I have 3xy squared times 2x to the 4th, y to the 3rd, divided by 6x to the 8th, y. Okay, I do have the power rule happening, so that's the first thing I need to do. 3 squared is 9, because 3 times 3. And then I multiply my exponents. 1 times 2 is x squared. 1 times 2 is y squared. I bring down the times. 2x to the fourth, y to the third, because that one doesn't have a power, and it's being divided by 6x to the eighth y. Okay, so here we go. 9 times 2 is 18, and when you're multiplying, you add, so 2 plus 4 becomes x6, and 2 plus 3 becomes y5, over 6x to the eighth y. Now I do my division, so 18 divided by 6 is 3. 6 minus 8 becomes negative 2, and 5 minus 1 becomes 4. This is the only piece I'm not okay with. It has a negative. So I open up my fraction, the 3 stays on top, the x drops to the bottom, becomes positive, and the y stays on top. And there's my final answer. Okay, for number 25, excuse me, 6bc to the third times 3b to the fifth c squared divided by 5b to the fifth c squared times 2b to the third c to the sixth. Okay, there's no power rule happening. I have multiplication in the top, multiplication in the bottom, and then division. I'm going to do both multiplications at the same time. I'm going to go across. 6 times 3 is 18, and then I add my exponents. So 1 plus 5 becomes b to the sixth. 3 plus 2 becomes c to the fifth. Keep my divide. 5 times 2 is 10. b5 and b3, so 5 plus 3 is b to the eighth. c2, c6, 2 plus 6 is c to the eighth. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to divide. So 18 divided by 10, when I convert back to a fraction, gives me 9/5. 6 minus 8 becomes b to the negative 2, and 5 minus 8 becomes c to the negative 3. I'm not okay with either of those pieces, so I'm going to keep my 9/5 and extend my fraction bar. The b has to drop to the bottom to become positive, and the c has to drop to the bottom to become positive. And there's my final answer. Now, for me to know if you're paying attention, I want you to write omit on this challenge problem. That lets me know you paid attention, you watched this. If you aren't writing omit, that tells me you aren't paying attention, so you're missing out on points. Ask for help.